Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are at, and welcome. Today, we are going to talk about ownership. What is it? What is ownership? Is it financial equity in a company? Uh, is it only that? Can it be something more? And if it is more, what does that look like? Hi, my name is Larry, and my intent today is that we're going to walk through and I'm going to share with you 14 rules that are going to broaden the definition of ownership. And it's these principles that can lead to a culture and a mindset with your employees that then can become your competitive advantage. So let's get going. Rule number one, the company is the product. Yes, the company in the end, when you think about ownership, is really the end result of everyone's efforts, everyone in the company. And we're going to talk about that down the road too, what that really means for your people. Because it's important that people understand that they themselves have a direct role to play in creating the kind of company where they want to work. Some of the basic premises of that are that, one, you teach people how to think like an owner. Number two is that you also teach them to act like owners. And the third part of that is that when that happens, people get to share in the rewards of great performance and success. But the caveat to that too is that you also get to share in any of the agony of any missed opportunities that you might come across or have. So that rule number one, the company is the product. Somewhat related to that is rule number two. A company isn't worth anything if nobody else wants to own it. Boy, isn't that true? Really, to build value in a company, you have to look at it from the outside. You got to remove your own sentimental attachment to it. How would an outside investor think about your company? What would cause that person to want to own a portion or even all of it? Right? So one good point is that an outside investor would probably definitely want to own a company if all of the employees in that company thought just like an owner and also had an ownership mindset. It's really related to that number one of the company is the product. If you were to go out and sell your company to an outside investor, they're not buying the beer that you sell. They're not buying the customer service that you give. They're not buying all of the stats that you put up in your operational statistics. What they're really buying is they're buying that company. That is the product. So a company isn't worth anything if nobody else wants to own it. Let's get on to number three. The bigger the pie, the bigger the individual slices. This is where we start thinking about what's possible. It's not just head down, focused really on the moment at hand and just doing my job. It's really focusing on how can we increase overall value of the organization. Some of these individual slices can definitely involve equity ownership if that's the direction you want to go, if you want to offer equity ownership to employees. But individual slices can also be those sharing of rewards that comes when success happens together as an organization. And the bigger that pie of success, the bigger the individual slices are for everybody. Back early in my career as a brewer, I worked for a company called Granite City Food and Brewery. It's based out of the Midwest, Minneapolis. And as 3 or 4 years into the company, as I rose into the brewery manager position, I was given stock options. Granite City had become a public company, so they were traded on, I think, the NASDAQ it was. And so I had these stock options that pretended that I knew what they were and that because I had them, I would act in the best interests of the company because I would want to reap the rewards of that. The challenge is that I was never taught specifically what that meant. I never saw how what I did on a day-to-day basis could impact those stock options. I think in my head, what I thought was I didn't have control. It was up to the CEO. It was up to my boss, the chief operating officer. It was up to the financial people guy at the top. In my head, they were the ones who were responsible. So because of that, I didn't see how I could make a difference. My behavior didn't change. How I thought about how I did my job, it probably remained focused on my own individual goals. I wasn't really thinking about company goals. And that brings us to law number 4. And that is stock is not a magic pill. Right? Giving equity ownership to somebody isn't going to automatically change people's behavior. If you've spent your entire career focused on a job description, it's really difficult to stop thinking like an employee and to start thinking about what's best for the company as a whole. Shifting from that employee thinking to ownership thinking is tricky. You've got to constantly teach and educate and model ownership behavior. And that's something we're going to touch on again in a rule down the road. So rule number 4, realizing that stock or equity ownership is not a magic pill. So let's get to number 5. So early in 2022, I was working with a brewery that launched the Great Game of Business. That's what I am. I'm a certified coach for the Great Game of Business. And in early January, we launched with their entire company. Shortly after that launch, their production team, which involved the brewery personnel and the cellar people, they put together a mini game. A mini game is something that we do. It's a short-term improvement project. And the theme of their mini game was community. And we're going to do this for 90 days. And their objective was to log a certain number of hours cross-training on packaging duties. And the original intent, along with the theme of community for them, was that they wanted to build knowledge of other roles in the company. And then in turn, it would help them create a stronger team and community within the company. Well, often when you ask questions of the world, you get these answers that appear because you're now tuned in to the new or the different. And in a way, that's what happened at this brewery. It turns out that the mini game coincided with the packaging department being short-staffed. I think they were down 2 to 3 people, which was essentially half of the packaging team. And this was happening during one of the brewery's busiest production schedules of the year. You see, they have a beer that sells extremely well for St. Patrick's Day. And so the first quarter of their fiscal year is one of the best quarters for them all year long. And now they're short-staffed in packaging. Well, what the cross-training mini game ended up doing was it helped the short-staffed packaging department hit, and these numbers came straight from my client, Greg, helped them hit a 99.6% order fulfillment rate, which was up 1.2% over their previous year. And they didn't cut any orders to anybody. Greg, my client, who is one of the brewery's owners, said that from the awareness, the great game, the financial numbers that people were becoming aware of, and that awareness that it provided, people began to see a direct line from cross-training to that order fulfillment to their critical number. And the critical number is defined as that one goal that everyone is focused on for the year. Well, beyond the numbers, and let's go back to that question that gets sent out to the world. In this case, the theme of community. Greg, my client, shared what he saw as really the bigger moral. And I'm going to read a quote directly from Greg because I think it really captures the essence of what this next rule is about. He writes, "People are sometimes scared to change what they do in relation to others. The cross-training minigame gave people permission and safety to cross lines. It was an open invitation from everyone to everyone to come into my space and learn my work. It became a safe way for the packaging team to ask for help and overcome their machismo of feeling weak if they have to ask for help." So that gets us to number 5, in that it takes a team to build equity value. You're not going to do this by yourself. And an ownership culture surrounded by a team is really built on mutual trust and respect. In order to have both of these, it's important that everyone in the company engages in frank, open, honest communication about the true state of the business. And part of building that trust of what the true state of the business is teaching employees the financials of the business so that they can think like owners. In fact, this past July, I presented a CBP talk on how to build trust and engagement towards creating that culture of ownership. I suggest you go back into the archives and find it. Learn a little bit more about what that trust component is in terms of building a team to get that equity value. Number 6, failures are fine as long as they strengthen the company. Yes, of course you want everyone to experience success and have a chance at rewards. Importantly, though, is that rewards come only after success, not before. And as long as people understand that rule, you can handle failures. You can learn from your mistakes. Where trouble really begins to brew from failure is that when people, and I mean everybody, loses sight of that common goal. People start doing their own things. They start going in their own directions. And perhaps people start getting rewarded for the work they've done, while over here somebody is left out. So as long as you're all headed in the same direction and those rewards happen only after success occurs, then failures are fine as long as they strengthen the company. Moving on, number 7, ownership needs to be taught. Remember what we said back when we were talking about rule number 4, and that stock isn't a magic pill? What needs to happen? Yes, you have to constantly teach, educate, and model ownership behavior. Stock or equity given out on its own doesn't mean that people understand what they have. I didn't understand it when I was at Granite City. That's why employees can still have an ownership mindset. You can have a culture of ownership without actual equity involvement. Most business success is measured through financial results. Hence, it's vital to teach people about the numbers. Showing people how their role every day in the decisions that they make and how that has a direct line of sight to the financial success of the company is important. The test of that teaching then comes when employees use the knowledge that they've gained to make real life choices in the work that they do every day. So, number 7, ownership needs to be taught. Moving on, we're halfway through. Number 8, you build an ownership culture by breaking down walls. I like financials. Maybe not everybody does. I do. In fact, as far back as high school, I was the junior class treasurer. And later on in my career in brewing, I was the treasurer of the board of directors for the Brewers Association for 5 years. And it was because of this interest that I had in numbers that on my own time and over time, I picked up knowledge, as whether it was figuring out what are income statements or balance sheets because I was interested in investing, or because I was in a management team at the place where I worked, I would get to see some financial reports, and I'd ask questions and I'd be curious. And so I was always interested in learning more. Well, later in my career, at one of the last companies I worked at, I would occasionally suggest ways that we could teach other managers simply some of the financial concepts that could help them do their jobs, help them understand their role better. Or I would sit down and I would help create some spreadsheets for specific managers to help them better understand how what they do impacts their role, or how their role impacts the financials. And every time I did this, I would be told that I was stepping on the toes of the bookkeeper. In fact, at one point, and this wasn't long before I left that brewing job, the current GM sat down with me and he told me, he said, "Hey, Larry, I appreciate everything you do around here. But," yeah, there's that but, "you are only production." I was essentially told, stay in the brewery and leave the numbers to others. So that gets to that breaking down walls. Showing people that an ownership mindset means opportunity, not exclusion. Understanding that ownership comes from the bottom up. It doesn't get pushed from the top down. A key concept of ownership is that people support what they help create, whether it's their work plans, whether it's some forecasts of what they intend to do, or in my case, taking an interest in teaching others about numbers. It's important that you build an ownership culture by breaking down walls and showing that it means opportunity. Number 9, getting out is harder than getting in. So what's your exit strategy? If you're an owner, you got in, certainly, and that probably was a lot of work too. Yet it's actually harder to get out than it is to get in. Have you thought about it yet? You know, when you are a founder or majority shareholder in a privately held company, how to leave is a topic that is rarely talked about. How do you leave with a clean conscience? How do you leave knowing that your company is going to be okay? That the people who work in that company are going to continue to thrive? That the company is going to still be around? Well, the compelling answer is that you begin creating a culture where everyone thinks and acts like an owner. You know, because getting out is definitely harder than getting in. Number 10, to maximize equity value, you have to think strategically. You know, the value of your business is way more than your operational metrics. Just because you've hit certain metrics this quarter and that quarter doesn't necessarily mean that you've increased equity value. You got to think long-term and strategically. And in an ownership culture, people will look at the business strategically to increase equity value and improve the company's marketplace position. Because when people are learning the financials and what their role is in creating that success, then they also can participate in what we call high involvement planning. Now, we're not going to talk about that today. That's a topic for a whole nother seminar, maybe even a 2 or 3 hour seminar. Simply know, though, that high involvement planning is about engaging everyone in your company into understanding what your strategy is for growth. It brings about realities of the marketplace to employees. And critically, it gets everyone's buy-in and confidence in the company's strategy so that, again, you're all moving forward in the same direction. So to maximize equity value, you have to think strategically, and that's everyone. Number 11, you create wealth by building companies, not by selling products or services. Right? The true profit of a business is really in building companies. If you go out and sell a beer, you can make 6 cents, maybe even 16 cents if you're primarily a tap room on every dollar of revenue. Yet if you sell the brewing company, you might be able to make $6 million. That's where the true profit and the true wealth is. So when you understand and play the game of business at the highest level, you really begin to understand what we started with, rule number 1, which is what? Right. Rule number 1, the company is the product, not the beer. So you create wealth by building companies. Now we're getting to one that I really like. Number 12, a company is only as good as its people. Yeah. Right? To build a culture of ownership, one of the first places that you've got to start is by getting the cycle of leadership development going. It's people coming in, it's learning skills, it's moving up in an organization, and it's repeating that process. Many of you might be familiar with Gallup. The organization has done immense amounts of work in the realm of employee engagement. And you might be familiar with their Q12. It's Gallup's 12 questions that really help gauge employee engagement in an organization. This past June, I watched an interview with Jim Clifton, the chairman and former CEO of Gallup. And one of his comments early in the interview stuck with me. And that comment is that he identified the single most important question of the 12 on that engagement survey. And that is, at work, someone cares about my development. That's the number one key factor and question for helping to determine engagement. Someone cares about my development. How many of you say, when you sit down to do some planning or thinking about the upcoming year, and you think about how your business is going to grow, how many of you say, hey, let's grow our business by growing our people? Think about that for a moment. Let's grow our business by growing our people. Yes, the process is long-term. It can be arduous, certainly can be frustrating, and it requires time and energy for sure. Yet your people want challenges and they want opportunities to grow, right? Go back to rule number 8 about breaking down walls. It's about showing people that they have opportunity And that opportunity to grow and learn leads to an ownership mindset. And in the end, it's really where the rewards ultimately come from. And along these lines, an aha moment for me was realizing, where do the numbers really, in fact, come from in a business? When asked, like me, most people will say, well, if we do see the numbers, it comes from the accountant. He's sitting in his office in the back. It comes from the bookkeeper. She's the one that hands me the sheet of paper that shows some kind of a profit statement. So yeah, it's the back office that really is the one who produces the numbers. Yet in reality, it's every employee in the decisions that they make every single day who create the numbers. All the accountant and bookkeeper are doing is reporting what the employees have already done. So for your company to be as good as your people, would it make sense to teach them and support their growth, which is what they want anyway? So a company is only as good as its people. All right, we only got 2 to go. It's good, right? Number 13, ownership is all about the future. Yeah. Educating employees about the long term is critical in maintaining the motivational power of ownership and keeping that focus on what really matters. And even if employees don't have equity ownership, they may have goals of their own. They may have dreams of their own. And they may want to ensure a consistent and ever-growing paycheck, some bonuses, participating in that success for themselves. I think to a podcast that I've listened to called Scaling Up. It's about companies that are in the mid-tier level, and they are finding ways that they can significantly scale their business. And an owner of one of these companies was talking about how when new employees come into his business, one of the first things he does is he talks to them and he asks them, what's your dream? What do you want to really make happen? And it could be for them personally. It doesn't have to have anything to do with the company. He doesn't give his employees ownership in the company. And in his office, if you walk into his office, you will see framed on his walls all of these different dreams, goals, aspirations. And these are the things that his employees are driving for. It's the employees thinking about their future. And this owner's role, as he sees it, is how can he build that ownership culture within the company so that his employees can see success from their work together. And that is forward thinking. That is thinking about the future. So ownership is all about the future. All right, we're on the last one. Number 14. Yes. You gotta wanna. Oh yeah, you gotta wanna. This is fundamental, right? Maybe it should even be the first one. However, we get through all these rules and it still comes down to, both for you as an owner, for your employees, you gotta wanna do it, right? People are only going to go beyond a paycheck and their day-to-day work when their motivation is from the inside. We talked about that a little bit ago, thinking about the future. Maybe somebody wants to see financial success so that they could help buy a house for their parents. That's what one of this guy's employees did. And that came internally, that motivation. So whatever goal you have as an equity owner or as an employee with an ownership mindset, if you don't have it in you, it's not going to happen. You gotta wanna. So as we wrap up here, when a group of people with a common goal, the knowledge to act, the freedom to go after it, and that burning fire in the belly, when they all gather with that, they really become almost impossible to stop once they get going. So what are 3 things that you can do today, that you can do tomorrow to help begin instilling an ownership mindset in your company? Well, let's talk about one of the rules. It takes a team to build equity value. One of the rules. How are you showing people that their work really matters? Find ways that you can show them that they are an important part of the team. Begin trusting them. That along that lines of trust, because that's a huge part of a team. You got to have trust. Go find my CVP talk from July, where we discussed trust and its importance for a team and how you can use that trust to begin building that equity value in that team. Number 2, second thing you can go do, ownership. It needs to be taught. So what can you do? Well, teach your team how hard it is to make money. Do they even know how much money you make? Maybe you don't make any money. There's no reason to keep that a secret. In fact, when you share with them, they might very well be surprised that how little money a brewery can really makes. One fun way to share with them about what your profit is to do a demonstration. Don't pull out a spreadsheet of your profit and loss statement. Okay, yeah, you're going to want one with you for this exercise. Yet, if you package your bottle, get 100 cans or bottles of beer. Or if you are only a tap room and you don't package, get 100 pint glasses out, gather everybody around. And then what you do is you say, hey, these 100 bottles of beer, these represent $1 of sales. How many bottles are left over once we account for all of our expenses? So yeah, this is where somebody on the side has your income statement. You take out, well, malt, hops, and ingredients are this much. If it's whatever the percentage is, you pull that many bottles away. What are your costs for labor? What are your costs for sales and marketing? Before you know it, you're down to the end, and well, hopefully you've got a few bottles left over. But it's a real visual presentation of the real challenge and how hard it is to make money. So show them. Another thing you could do in terms of ownership needs to be taught, go find a copy of this book called Financial Intelligence, A Manager's Guide to Knowing What the Numbers Really Mean. The author, Karen Berman, Joe Knight. It's a fabulous book that really makes numbers easy. It doesn't get into the nitty gritty, but it makes them understandable. In fact, get 5 copies of that book, hand them out to your management team and read it together and learn together, right? Ownership needs to be taught. Third thing you can do, a company is only as good as its people. Yeah, I love this one. One thing you can do, and I got this from Jim Clifton from that interview, and it's that begin having one meaningful conversation per week with each of your direct supports. Notice I said supports, not reports. It's your role as a manager to support the people below you. That conversation can be 5 minutes, it can be 15 minutes, it doesn't have to be long. It can be on the phone, it can be in person. Heck, if you really have to, it can be over email. What do you talk with them about? Talk with them about their goals. What are the barriers to achieving those goals? What are the struggles that you can take away in the job that they do every day? Talk about relationships within the company, right? The essence is figuring out how you can support them because it's your job to grow your people. In fact, go watch that interview with Jim Clifton that I mentioned. Drop me an email. I'll give you that later. It's in the chat box as well. And I'll send you a link to it. In fact, send me your email. I'll also send you the notes that I took on. I watched it twice because it was so chock full of great information. I'll send you my notes and I'll send you a link to the interview. So today we've talked about the what. What are the rules of ownership? What are those principles that really can lead to a culture and mindset of ownership? That's the what. We didn't even talk about the how. I had that on the list that we were going to talk about it today. I realized, whoa, I got way too much information here. So when you want to learn the how, of building an ownership culture where employees can, one, think, they can, two, act, and they can, three, feel like owners. Connect with me and let's talk. Yeah, you can reach me at these places. My email, really simple, larry@larry.coach. It's in the comments section as well. You can also find more information at my landing page. It's greatgame.com/coach-larry-chase. Thank you for hanging out with me today to learn about how an ownership culture can be your competitive advantage. And if you've got any questions, I'll take them in the chat. Have a great day. Cheers.